is just the fact that my story is the least important thing, except for the idea that it can be done, because my story doesn't matter to somebody who's sitting on a couch, they're addicted to alcohol, drugs, or they're going through some sort of depression, or they've eaten themselves into a place where their physical health is out of alignment with their desires, and so on and so forth. So the idea is that there's people like us that we want to be out there presenting that there's just that option. Because my story, and I've learned this as I've traveled around the world and done what I've done. I used to think it was about me. It's not about me. It's not about me at all. It's about reaching into somebody's life like you're doing with this particular podcast, with your heart, with your spirit, where you're wanting to ease suffering in the world, to say, hey, here's my story. You may not attach with these other 100 people, but you hear this at exactly the right time when you're like, I know I need to make a change.
This is Scratch Your Own Itch, the one show that delivers the conversations that we're afraid to share, but need to. This show is all about creating a life worth living. I'm Logan Tyler Nelson, and I'm your host. So, you're going to hear conversations with creators and entrepreneurs talk about what they do, their current and past traumas, how they became who they are, and what they are truly curious about. This is the show where we talk about the things we think about a lot, but need to talk about more. Please take note that this show is not a substitute for actually creating a life worth living, because this show will stir your beliefs, make you question what it means to create a life worth living. So my promise to you is to always give you one question to answer for yourself today, to start turning your dreams into a reality. So, my curiosity question for you is, what's your addiction? Let me ask you that again. What is your addiction? Okay, let me set the tone. Have you tried eating your way through depression before it eats away at you? Do you disassociate from reality so that reality can't get to you? Maybe you're addicted to toxic relationships. Maybe you gamble too often. Click too many items to put into the online shopping cart. Take a different man or woman home every evening. Consume a new bottle of wine every night. Chase emotionally unavailable people to avoid confronting your own unavailability. Go back to your abusive ex. Work overtime to avoid creating a life outside of work. Well, if any of this resonates with you, I want to let you know that you're not alone, because we all have our vices and our addictions, and it's about how we can redirect our energies towards helping out early for the better. I know this is to be true because of what my guest has done and what his mission on this planet is to, help you alleviate some suffering. And here's the thing, Jason is not my average guest. He's done some amazing things. Jason Sisneros is a public speaker, entrepreneur, a philanthropist. His life has taken him around the world, speaking on over 3,000 stages, consulting with hundreds of business owners, and supporting charities across the globe. As a speaker, Jason takes it very seriously, and he's a genuine man, and I am super excited for you to meet who this awesome dude is and get a little more of his story. So give a warm welcome to the one and only Jason Sisneros.
Hey brother, how are you doing today?
Good, Jason. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it, dude.
Well, it's my pleasure, and it sounded like in that intro you just went through every single mistake I ever went. You're like, well, let me look up what could we like find somebody who's experienced and made every single mistake in the world. What has Jason done? He's done this. So you just listed out everything that I've ever done. Good job.
Well, you know what? The person who has gone through the most is usually the person who just understands. They listen and to understand instead of listening to reply. They start to really take on things that matter versus just making a dollar. They want to make a difference. And the thing is, I brought you on today because I just want, first of all, I want to be able to make someone feel less alone, because that's the mission of this show, and also maybe reveal to them how you got to where you got to by scratching your own itch. You know, the name of the show,
Sure.
and that is to me, by solving a problem that you have with yourself, now you're doing it for other people at the same time. So how did you really get to where you got to by scratching your own itch?
Well, I love the question. I love the format, or I love the even the premise that you're putting out there is that you're not alone. The only reason why I do the speaking I do and have kind of put myself out there publicly is to show people that you end up leaving two legacies. You either are a warning or you're an example. And I learned that from my mentor, Tony Robbins, and my life. And I think the lives of people who can make a difference in the world are people who have been both. My part of my life has been a warning of what not to do. And then, there's obviously parts of my life that I'm super proud of that are examples of what people have the potential to do. Right. And so my journey and my story and all that kind of stuff, it only serves the gist of it is that it serves from you can come from nothing, and not only from nothing, but less than nothing, and also making all of the mistakes in the world to modifying that into a life that you're proud of, that serves, that impacts, that's a better example for your children or for people around you. So my story is less important than the idea that the concept and what inspires people, whether they're attached to me or Tony Robbins or anybody or anyone else that inspires them, is just the fact that my story is the least important thing, except for the idea that it can be done, because my story doesn't matter to somebody who's sitting on a couch, they're addicted to alcohol, drugs, or they're going through some sort of depression, or they've eaten themselves into a place where their physical health is out of alignment with their desires, and so on and so forth. So the idea is that there's people like us that we want to be out there presenting that there's just that option. Because my story, and I've learned this as I've traveled around the world and done what I've done. I used to think it was about me. It's not about me. It's not about me at all. It's about reaching into somebody's life like you're doing with this particular podcast, with your heart, with your spirit, where you're wanting to ease suffering in the world, to say, hey, here's my story. You may not attach with these other 100 people, but you hear this at exactly the right time when you're like, I know I need to make a change. Because it's the individual listening that's the only person that can actually make the changes in their lives that they need to do. I was the only person, right? I was the only person that could grab my life and actually change it and shift it. And understanding, I did a live about this morning, actually, where understanding that normalcy bias, right? Everybody wants to get to this place called a comfort zone. Or we just settle into the place that we're at as it's our comfort zone. Like whatever it is, it's like, okay, well, I've been out there slinging and $10 an hour is my comfort zone. I can figure out how to make a life, how to, be able to put a roof over my head, food in my stomach, and that kind of stuff, versus, stepping outside of that comfort zone to say, make $20 an hour, to improve your life skills, to be able to put a kid through college, to be able to help a family member that may be sick and whatnot. But that's where it comes back to, is to say, okay, when things happen in our lives, whatever it is that caused us to be overweight. And again, remember that I'm speaking from a place of being in a bad marriage. I cheated on my wife, crashing companies, being not an absentee father for a period of time, and making all of these mistakes that that most people are out there, they try to hide them or they try to ignore them and they try to point fingers at everybody else. I think we live in a time in a day and age where you're not going to be able to hide anything. And the less you hide, the more power you have. The more you try to hide, the less power you have, because you know you're being disingenuous, right? So, to kind of bring that all to a point, because I know you've allowed me to go on a little bit of a rant here, is that things will happen in our lives, and you should be constantly striving to push yourself out of your own comfort zone before the world does. And in so doing, you realize that when things happen to you, when you're faced with challenges, whether that be a relationship, a health challenge, an addiction, a money situation, nobody's coming to save you, right? Nobody's coming to save you. And you have all of the power in your world to be able to execute and to be able to resource yourself to start making incremental improvement, especially in the United States of America, right? I was adopted. My adopted father went to prison ultimately for trying to kill me and my mom when I was 17. Very abusive, broke my nose. I started stepping in front of her beatings when I was very, very young, 7, 8, or 9. Broke my nose 18 times by the time he went to prison. Very poor family, moved around a lot, saw a lot of violence, all that kind of fun stuff. And then when he went to prison, I did what I knew. I collected money, I dealt drugs, I did all that kind of stuff, and had to make a decision that because I went through that childhood, I could go the rest of my life. Because when I told people what my background was, what my upbringing was, I always got something along the lines of this. Oh my gosh, that's so rough. Poor you. Like, it's amazing that you can even do anything. Like, and you get this onslaught of people who are being what they consider supportive, emotionally supportive, when they're really weakening you. The person who told me, Jason, your outcome in life is completely, and this was Tony Robbins, your outcome in life is completely and directly proportionate to your ability to take personal responsibility for the mistakes you've made. Wherever you are in your bank account, in your relationship, in your weight, in your any facet of your life whatsoever, where you are is 100% because of you and your own decisions. And that's a kick in the nuts to some of us that are like, well, it's easier for me to blame other people. It's easier for me to blame who's the president of the United States is. It's easier for me to blame those evil Democrats or those evil Republicans or, those evil white people or those evil black people or those evil Mexicans or whatever it is. It's easier for the easiest thing in the world to do short term is to transfer responsibility from you to an outside source. The hardest thing to do is to live with the results of those short-term sugar highs of putting responsibility somewhere else. The hardest thing to do is to take responsibility in the moment, and the easiest thing long-term is for you to reap the rewards of knowing and understanding that the one and only individual in your life that can take control of whatever situation you're in. And I've been around the world, my story, like you said, you did your research and whatnot. I've been around the world. I've been in the poorest countries. I've been in the richest countries. I've talked to prisoners. I've talked to presidents. I've talked to heads of industry. I've talked to the heads in the UN. I've been associated with a lot of work going on around the world. And so somebody can't come to me and have a legitimate conversation to say, in the United States of America, because I'm white, because I'm Hispanic, because I'm Asian, because I'm black, that I do not have an opportunity. It's a lie. It's a lie that we either buy and accept for our own life, or it's a lie that we challenge the premise of it. And so, go ahead.
First of all, I want to acknowledge the story and just be like, wow. Second off, I think the reason why we do feel like we're being fed lies right now is because there is so much scam out there. Because we basically are now cyborgs living on the internet. I mean, we look at our phones more than we actually look at people's faces nowadays. And so it does become this sort of like an illusion that a lot of us are kind of like living inside of, even though our brains might calculate it as real. What's your thoughts on that, and being able to actually how do you find your own truth? Do you know what I mean?
I do. And it's a great point, because whether you have a screen or before we had screens, essentially digital versus, what we used to call the real world, what we've built up and given, how we've given meaning to the world ultimately becomes our reality. And that's been the case since recorded mankind, is that we make up stuff in our mind, and then that's the reality that we end up living. Let's say, if you are relegated to a caste or, a different level of let's say that you're in a caste in India and you're a lower caste versus a higher caste, that informs who you are. It doesn't necessarily, it informs the mindset. It doesn't necessarily, as we now know, doesn't inform the capability. And so if because somebody thinks that, if you're in old time and you're a female and you were worth 3 cattle versus 50 cattle, right? That informed your value. And it's always, and any time in this world, whether it's today via screens or whether it was, centuries ago by cattle, it doesn't really matter how you are valued. If you allow it to be valued by the outside world, it will always be in somebody else's control. Now, if I think I'm worth 50 cattle and then the evidence shows up that I'm only worth 5, I have a decision to make. I have a decision. They got it wrong. They got the calculation wrong. And so what we're doing today to bring that up into what your question that you're asking is, okay, we have screens. We're interacting with the world. We're developing this concept of who we are based around another input, another outside input. My phone has, and my digital world has very little to do with who I am as a human being, because I've built up in my own mind who I am, what value I have, and what outcome I want to see for my life. The difference between the question that you're asking me is separated between two realms of people. The people that have picked a destination in their mind that they're going to then measure against. I want to do this with my life, and you measure against it every day to make sure that you're modifying your approach. You're getting feedback to whether you're just smoking crack or whether you're actually making progress and improving skill sets to be able to achieve that outcome, or you're just sitting back, letting the world and life happen to you, right? Life either happens to you or happens for you. And the only difference between the two of those is your choice. So if you take control and say, here's my destination, I want to go there. And everybody, and I've heard people say before, well, okay, I decided that I want to be in $1 million house, and have 2 boats and blah, 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 blah. But I live in, downtown Detroit, and I've got nobody that will invest in me, and blah, blah, blah. Well, you got to take steps, right? Every single person in the world who has been unsuccessful, or who has been successful, has a story of how they overcame the odds. But you got to get working on it. And whether you're in front of a screen, whether you're digitally connected, whatever it is, you can use these. These are the greatest tools in the world. However you look at anything can be a resource or add to your sense of unresourcefulness. So it's, who you want to develop into is still completely in your control, whether you're in the digital age or you're in, in the so-called good old days where we didn't have so many screens. The issue is still in our hands. We still develop, we still design who we are, or you allow the world to do it for you. And that's the big thing, the big microphone that I try to carry around is, to your point of not being alone, you design your world by your choices, by your language, by your physiology, by your focus, by your emotions that you are currently choosing on a day in and day out basis.
Hey, Logan Tyler Nelson here. So, I'm wondering, are you ready to amplify your brand and dominate your industry? or maybe establish your credibility and really get valuable brand exposure and showcase why you're the natural choice in your niche. Oh yeah, and on top of that, crush your sales goals. And you can do this all from the comfort of your home or office. But let's say you don't have the time to go through thousands of podcasts on iTunes and find the right shows to pitch, or ones that actually take guests and target your potential ideal client. Because sometimes you'll need some help. And that's what Interviews on Demand does. We help you get on podcasts that are going to amplify your brand, increase your qualified leads, and get you valuable brand exposure. So if you're interested, head over to the link, interviewsondemand.com, and check us out and see what we've got to offer. Hope to hear from you soon. All right, back to the show.
All my memories, no matter where I go, even if I'm out to nothing, I know there's always something. It's not a fitness test, but it'll always keep me running. One good thing about music when
it gives context to sort of like, you know, we are exactly what you're saying. Like, we are sort of like in a place where we're directly responsible for the place that we're at because of what actions we've taken or what actions we didn't take and stuff like that. And I think that's a huge question we could probably talk about for hours. But I'd like to go into scratching the surface curiosity questions because I know your time's limited. And these are just questions that I came up throughout the week that I needed to ask you specifically. And also maybe make someone feel less alone and then also learn a little bit more about you and what you do, okay?
Love it.
Awesome. So the first question I'd love to ask you is what is a belief that you had 5 years ago that is just kind of silly now thinking about it now, just because of the transformation you've gone through?
I had a belief that social media was and I'm trying to put this into words because it was not just 5 years. It was, it's been since social media came out. I feel like social media has given voice to those people who in the past were relegated to their parents', basements because they didn't add value to the world. And now they've got a microphone to be whiny little bitches. And it's given them this little, instead of adding value, they just, you can see it on social media everywhere, where people, they don't even know human beings. Like Tony Robbins, you could say, even Mother Teresa had a freaking hate group, and they just go out there and the only value that they feel in their own entire life is tearing other people down. And so I think that's been a real detriment. So I didn't think, it was a silly thought, but I didn't think that social media was going to be able to stand because of the just pure nastiness of the nature of it. And that was a silly thought because now we've been able to add and do a lot of good through social media, but that was again, nobody's brilliant all the time. Right. And the only way you can judge a lifetime of financial success is that you won more than you lost, because you will lose financially and in business. And you just got to hope that your losses or your successes outweigh your losses. So that was something that it was really, really stupid of me. And it was more than 5 years ago, but it was definitely something that I am embarrassed to think that social media wasn't going to be sticking around.
Yeah. You're not alone. It's kind of scary where it's going, but I really I have great faith inside of the future now.
Me too.
So I think technological advancements are only helping us, not hurting us. We just have to be wise about, you can turn almost anything into a weapon. Fire can be used for cooking, or fire can be used as a weapon to kill somebody and burn them. So,
Amen. Amen.
Anyways, the next question I'd love to ask is, what is something that most people don't know about you, like at all? Like, what's something that you've never shared on a podcast, and Something that is just, I know you put it all out there, but I think you can think of one thing.
It's tough to get me to say something that people don't know, because that's my whole platform is, nobody, I call it 8-miling myself all the time with my messages. I never want anybody to think that I'm preaching at them from a position of superiority, right? That's not my platform. My platform is, the Bald Avenger is kind of my show and my main theme character, and it's the island of the misfits, right? Which is who I don't know how to relate to somebody who's made no mistakes. Therefore, I could never follow anybody that never made any mistakes. And a lot of people are out there looking for people. They judge who they work with or who they hang with by people that can fake online how perfect they are. And I'm exactly the opposite. I would rather deal with somebody that comes out and tells me, hey, I robbed a bank, I cheated on my wife, and here's what I learned from it and why I'm not doing those things anymore, right? So finding something that I haven't said in public about myself is going to be a little bit of a reach. But let me see if I can. Let's see. I hang glide. I haven't talked about that very much I don't think ever on social media. So I mean, maybe that's something. I do hang gliding.
Yeah, hang gliding is great. I love hang gliding. What about sometimes I think like what a person's mission is, it actually ends up kind of hurting them. Maybe was there a deal during because I know you were trying to alleviate billions of people from hunger. Was there any deals that went down kind of badly during that time that you reached out to somebody and someone reacted, and you don't have to say names, but someone reacted in a way that was just completely opposite of what you actually thought they would react with?
Well, I get it's a lot. When it comes to people, you think that you're out there doing good things, and you actually switch and actually align your life with the activities of doing good things. And there's this entire world out there that's meant to say, or that's out there just to tear people down. Like I was talking about earlier, it's like, what are your, they basically go after the very character of who you are. And that's why, I just said before we started helping charities and going public and doing all the stuff that I've been doing, I came out, I wrote an entire book about all of my mistakes, so that nobody could come at me and say, hey, did you know this about Jason? Most people, and you're reading and following, doing some of the stuff that there is nobody that will catch me and they'll go, oh, did you know that Jason did this? Most of the people who know me will go, yeah, he talked about it like 72 times on his Facebook Live about the lessons that he learned and why he's not doing that anymore, right? And so when I don't ever consider, and this is another thing, right? How do people that you want to emulate, how do they think? And one of the big switches that I had, and may help your listeners, is that there's no such thing as failure. You just learn a way that it doesn't work, right? So when you ask about what are, some people that react differently, I've had that on the good side, I've had that on the bad side. But what I've done is I've been able to determine when you're thinking about charities, there's a large group of people. We did an anonymous study where people could just react. And we said, okay, what do you think about this subject? Because as you know, I'm associated with more than one charity and more than one subject. And so the biggest answer that came back that blew my mind was, I just don't care. And that answer was like, it's honest, it was anonymous, and people didn't have to worry about being judged for it. But when you see the shivering puppies on TV, when you think about the person over in Africa that's starving, when you think about, little girls being traded for sex around the world, when you think about a woman being beaten up so badly that she gets her teeth knocked out, when you think about those things, and then you have to, and you have to associate it to, I'm going through shit myself. I may be getting beat up. I may be, in one of these situations. I like, whatever it is, or I have a family, I have a job, I have, aches and pains, and I have all this stuff, and I just can't care about anything else. And that was a big switch for me, and a big learning experience to tell me that when we focus on ourselves, there's a tremendous amount of pain available to experience. The more I genuinely focus on other people and service, the less time I have to focus on my own problems. And that, in just the nature of it, the very nature of it, whether you get recognized on TV or in public or your local thing or whatever, just the source, just the resource of giving something to someone who is in a worse off position, a more vulnerable position than you are, ends up making your life better, because you can not, when you're serving other people, you can't experience pain in that moment. And, and so that was one of the biggest lessons. And those people who were like, I just don't care, in a different part of the survey that we did, it came up that they were that they had the least positive view about the future of their life. And people that were giving the most were people who were flat broke, and challenged money-wise, but they were going to their churches, they were doing the potlucks, they were serving at the soup kitchens, and they were genuinely happy because there's always somebody worse off than you. And the less selfish you can be, and the more optimistic and the more service-oriented you can be, the better your life always is. And that's something that I learned according to some of the people who disappointed. And remember, disappointment only comes when you have an expectation. And so the older I get, the wiser I get, the less expectation I have of someone, and you just put out your best service and let the chips fall where they may, instead of judging it by, well, I gave this person everything and they should have responded this way, which just, makes me miserable. And that means I wasn't really giving to give, I was giving to get. And that's kind of a couple of those minimal points that I could give you some feedback there. That helps.
No, absolutely. It helps a ton.
Hey, Logan Tyler Nelson here. I would so appreciate it if you took some time to hit the subscribe button. I really want to just honestly live and give. Why? Because I was told when I was young that if you're feeling down, the best way to feel better is by lifting someone up again. So in an effort to make someone feel less alone, please hit the subscribe button so the podcast has a better chance of being found and making someone feel less alone. And if you're feeling down, hey, it can help you. Know that by hitting that subscribe button, you just did someone a huge favor. So thank you for hitting that subscribe button.
I just want to really quickly ask you 2 more questions, 30 seconds or less kind of answers, nothing long. The second to last question is, if you could sit on a bench with anyone for an hour, who would it be and why?
If I could sit on a bench with anybody, it would be Ronald Reagan.
I like it.
I would want to sit on a bench with Ronald Reagan. He's a guy that was very pragmatic. I mean, he ended up being, what's considered the most successful Republican. People don't know a lot about the fact that he really did genuinely work both sides of the aisle. Started out as a Democrat, as a matter of fact, and then ended up ultimately becoming a Republican. And it's not his politics; it was his outcomes and his love of people that I really adored. And I would love to just sit with him and pick his brain about how he came up with some of the, his conversations that he had with Gorbachev that changed the entire complexion of a generation and an entire planet. The world we live in today was shaped by him and those conversations with Gorbachev. So that's somebody that I would massively love to sit down and just chat with.
That's so cool.
Martin Luther King's the other guy, though, because when you talk about what my outlook on life comes a lot from Martin Luther King and his statement that that we can't judge. Like, he was very gentle. He was very statements-like. He was very, I mean, not gentle. He was very a powerful orator. But his concept was that, you know, he wanted to live in a world, and his children to live in a world that we weren't judged by the color of our skin, but by the content of our character. And to me today, I would take that a step further and say that what I learned from him and how I execute my life is that I think the stupidest, the most ignorant thing that you can do is make a judgment about somebody because of the pigmentation of their skin, the sex that they were born as, the sexual orientation that they have. It's by the content of their character, which means the results that show up, which shows me how they believe and what they believe in. So he's another guy I would just love to sit back and kick it with.
That's awesome. You know, I believe I believe that we become the 5 people that we most associate ourselves with. And you know, you have a picture in your Facebook, for example, hanging out with Matthew McConaughey, and you've talked to Tony Robbins, and he's one of your mentors, and you've had just a plethora of very impactful and influenced-driven people. That how did you get in their circle, in their inner circle, and start being associated with them, and actually being able to give them value and look at you as someone who is of value versus just another person who wants to feed off of their fame?
Sure. Great question. I learned a long time ago. Again, it's all education. I didn't have the greatest father figure growing up, but reading books, listening to successful people, Zig Ziglar, these type of things. He always said, Zig Ziglar, who was one of my heroes in life, and one of the biggest blessings of my life was being invited to come in and actually speak to his team prior to him passing. And one of the things he always says is, he says, if you help enough other people get what they want, you'll always end up with what you want. And so when I was in these circles, I determined to serve them first, whether that was, things that they believed in, and to add more value than anybody else in their world, so that they would determine a relationship with me was a value add to them. And I mean, I'm surrounded by people who want my time. They want to be coached. They want to be mentored. They want to be, and very seldom do people come into my world and say, hey, what can I do for you so that this, right? And I think that how I've put myself in the realm that I happen to belong in now is by making massive mistakes, telling the truth about the mistakes that I've made, not trying to be somebody I'm not, always finding humor in the person that I am rather than the ego of what I've done, finding out what they're passionate about, adding value, and being the best at what I can do and what I have the ability to do. And so because if you determine to be the best, you're going to stand out amongst a bunch of people being mediocre, which will also in turn get you attacked, which actually adds fuel to my fire. So that's how I did it, or how I've done it.
That's awesome. That is something that people are probably going to listen to. They hear it. And I know what it's like, because I've been in that position where I hear this sort of message through a podcast, and I go, okay, what is it really that I can do for them?
Sure.
And it's usually just, it could be as simple as sending them a message and saying, hey, this is what you did for me. It could be even a little bit larger, maybe making a visual text, and you can do it with your freaking app on your phone, and just sending them, a picture of them with a quote on it, to just be totally transparent. I've done that for people too, and it lights them up, because guess what? It means that they're actually making an imprint on your life. And when you do that time and time again, it's like, you don't know what the ROI is right away, but I guarantee the return of investment is better just by doing that than it would be by doing nothing and just listening to it. So if you're listening to this,
and if you give to get, I just want to leave it. You leave your. If you give to get, you will always be miserable. So you got to give to give, and let the chips fall where they may. Thank you for having me on your show, brother. And I know you're about to go to the end of it, but you're doing great things. I expect great things from you, and you're a smart person. I think you have a caring heart, and you've got an amazing future in front of you. And I'm going to be keeping my eye on you.
Oh, thanks a lot, Jason. Yeah, check out Jason's. You can find him on Google, to type in Jason Sisneros. I'll also add that in the show notes. And just thank you for coming on, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. And I know you're headed out as well. And I want anybody that listens to this and don't wait any longer and just let another podcast, be just there and gone. Like, take action on it and reach out to one of us and say, hey, this is what it did for me. Facebook, tweet about it, Instagram about it. Like Jason said, 5 years ago he was thinking that all these social medias are just stupid, but it actually goes to prove you that we can all be wrong, and that's okay. You only learn ways to do it better, like Jason was saying earlier as well. So all this stuff does work, and the reason why maybe it's just going in one ear and out the other is because you hear it so much and it's not new. But when you keep on getting hit in the head, there's only so many times before you go, all right, I'm gonna get knocked down. You're just gonna get knocked down, and you need to get back up again. So Jason, thank you so much again. I really
My pleasure, brother.
It.
My pleasure.
All right, there's another episode of Scratch Your Own Itch. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to support the show by listening. The biggest compliment you could ever pay me is just by sharing this, because honestly, it doesn't take much, and it feels so good when people create something and take time. And when I see someone take time to create something that really just changed my day, either made me feel less alone, maybe put a smile on my face, made me laugh, made me feel wiser, I always want to share it with the world. Because why? When I share something that resonates with me, why not share it? I mean, that's just kind of the thing that goes around, and it's free. It takes no time at all other than just a click of the button, share, on either Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. Any of those social media platforms would be great to share this. So I really appreciate it. And I want to say that anybody who's looking to gain authority or expertise in their area, and they don't want to take another year or year and a half to write a book and wait until that's published, I think the best way is right now is to start a podcast. So if you're at all interested in starting a podcast, if you meet the certain requirements, I would love to help you with a podcast and also get a website going for you as well. And this is not an easy task. It's hard to actually get it done and get it out there. So every now and then we need some help, and I'm here for you. So please reach me at Logan at LoganTylerNelson.com if you're interested at all. And don't ever forget, you matter and you're enough.